give a warm Hooper's Edge welcome to the cousin, Dawson VanSteenhouse. Dawson, thanks for taking the time to join us on the podcast.
Absolutely, Steve. Anytime. I love talking to you guys in general. So being able to hop on here and do a legit conversation under your podcasting brand, I'm happy to do it anytime.
Well, I mean, really excited to have you on here because you've done something that I don't really know anybody personally that's done it, which is run a marathon, which you completed maybe a couple of weeks ago, something like that, the Houston Marathon. And there's a lot of takeaways that I want you, and I'll ask you about, that I think can apply to a lot of our basketball players that are listening to this. We got high school players that are driven. We got college players that listen to this. They're driven. They want to get better. And to be able to learn from somebody else, maybe it's not basketball, but they're physically challenging themselves, mentally challenging themselves to strive to get better, is something that they're going to be able to take away from listening to you running a marathon. So before we get into that, real quickly, introduce yourself to our listeners.
Alrighty. So my name is Dawson VanSteenhouse, as Steve said, and I am a family member of the Kramer family, the VanSteenhouse. Larry VanSteenhouse, my father, is Steve's dad, so that makes us cousins. I grew up around the Kramer family. I consider Misty Kramer and Todd Kramer my basically second mother and father. They're two of the most incredible people I know. I'm super fortunate to be able to go up to Michigan in the summertime and spend time with those guys. I'm a Texas boy, born and raised. Grew up in Texas playing basketball. Got to learn a lot of basketball from Steve. Growing up in the summers of Michigan, went to college here in Texas State University, graduated in 2018. And up to that point, I'm going to be honest, I hadn't really taken my physical condition seriously whatsoever. The most thought I ever put into staying into shape or getting into shape was what my high school basketball program put me through, or like going to work out with a buddy every once in a while. But physically, I was not in shape until probably halfway through 2018. I decided to sort of make a change and take my just general health and well-being a little bit more seriously. And I didn't do anything too drastic, but just slowly but surely, I tried to start doing the like fundamental building blocks, working out at least 5 times a week, going for short runs, just so I could make a positive change in my life, both physically and mentally, just because I needed to see that change after I got out of college.
Man, I remember a lot of summers over the years, whether we're working out at the pond, in the yard, obviously having yet some basketball camps coming up, and really enjoying making you do some things that were challenging. That was always a lot of fun. And now you're doing something that I have a hard time wrapping my mind around, which is run for a very long distance for a very long time. I run a mile and I'm like, all right, I'm good. I'm going to go do something else. Right. So you're getting into shape, but what made you decide that running for distance and eventually even completing a marathon was something that was realistic and something that you're going to challenge yourself to do?
It's funny, before I get into that, talking about the like summer workouts that you would put us through, just to give everyone an idea of how out of shape I was. We would go, and at my grandparents' house and your parents' house, there's this big pond, and you would always put us through these workouts where it's like you're running up the beach into the water, doing like frog jumps in the water, run out of the water, do push-ups. And there was one specific time I remember everyone's doing these exercises, and you're putting me, my dad, and then all your little brothers through it. And all of these people, I would say, are relatively in good shape, and I was not. And I remember I'm doing these frog jumps through the pond, and in my head, I'm thinking, I'm going to vomit, and I'm going to vomit very soon if I do not stop. And then Steve's behind me. He's like, you got to keep going. You got to be the best of your ability. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm going to vomit, but I want to be the best. And I'm doing these jumps, and sure enough, I had to get out of the pond, go into Graham's backwoods, and just get everything out of my system. And there's a point where I was like, I really need to change the way that I'm living. So all of that stuff, thank you for putting me through that, because it helped bring me to where I am today. And then tackling your question, I think that it was an accumulation of several things. So when I decided to get into better shape, I started running, and I figured out that I just enjoyed running in general. but I was doing everything on a very small scale, running 1 mile, running 2 miles, just in general, because I thought that it was a good way to begin a workout or a good way to end a workout or just a good way to get some cardio in on a Saturday or Sunday when I wasn't lifting. And then after about 6 months of that, I started to think, well, maybe I can push myself a little bit further. And I didn't even have a marathon or any sort of long distance goal in mind. It was just sort of like, let me throw my headphones in and let me go for a run and see how far I can get until I get tired, and then I'm going to stop running. And I wasn't caring about my pace. I wasn't caring about anything goal related. It was just, let me go and see how far that I can do this. So I did that for about once a week for probably over about a year. And then it got to the point where I could comfortably run about 10 miles before I would get tired. And then I'd be like, all right, enough. And then I would sit down with like friends and family and talk about just like exercise and running. And then they would be like, have you ever thought about a marathon? And I was like, no, it seems unattainable, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Just telling myself excuses. Well, in reality, it's not unattainable at all. I mean, if you've been running for any given amount of time, 6 months, a year, less than that, there's a training program out there for you that can put you on track to get you ready to be in a marathon. And that's the whole thing, is like, just plan properly and you will put yourself in a position to succeed when it comes to race day. And that was my whole thing. I'm not the best runner. I'm not in the best shape. I'm not a top tier athlete. However, I put in the proper amount of time into planning to ensure that when I got to that day on race day, I wasn't going to fail. And that was like my whole thing, is like, just prepare yourself so that when it comes to it and your muscles are aching, that you trained hard enough to rely on yourself to be able to finish it. So that's sort of how I got up to that point.
You mentioned a couple of really cool things right there that we can all take away from it. You said you didn't start with the goal first, right? You didn't start with this marathon in mind first. You said that you started small, and really explaining you started because there were things that you wanted to do from a health standpoint better, right? And I think that's something that we can all apply to whatever it is that we're doing in our life, is we got to think about, what's the type of person that I want to be, right? And the choices that I make today are shaping who I become tomorrow. The choices that I make today are shaping the person that I'm becoming in the future. What do I want my future self to be like? Okay, I see what that is. That should help determine the choices that I'm making today. And so we're making some of those choices before we get into the goal. And I think that's really, really valuable, because we hear about goals all the time, and they are great marks for us to try to hold ourselves accountable, put times and dates and all those things to it. But understanding first the type of person that we want to be is essential, so that when we do put a goal in place or a timeline in place or an event in place, it's in line with the vision that we have for ourselves. And you've done some of that. So you talked about getting a 6 month or a year, if you want to start running more distances, there's a training program out there for you. That's what I'm curious about. What was some of that training like leading up to running a marathon?
Right. So I would say, in 2019 or the beginning of 2020, I was like, all right, I think that I'm going to attempt to run a marathon. And then the pandemic happened and the Houston Marathon was canceled that year. And I think, honestly, I don't think I would have been ready to run it. I just wasn't mentally prepared. I wasn't serious enough about it. Excuse X, Y, and Z. But over the year of 2020, I was running consistently. I was running 3 to 5 times a week. And if you're trying to run a marathon, it's heavily suggested that you come into the marathon training with a year or two of consistent running, like whether it's 10 to 15 to 20 miles a week, have that under your belt, so that when you start the serious training, you're not just starting from scratch day one. So looking into marathon training programs, you can find 100 free templates online. I settled on is actually a first-time beginners women's marathon training program. And I just clicked on this link and it had this perfect little template. I can share it with you if anyone's interested in it. And it basically just outlines the 15 weeks leading up to the marathon, day by day, how much you need to run and how much effort you need to be putting into those runs, so that when marathon day comes up, you're ready. And the way it works is it's it's 4 days of running per week. And it is a short run with high effort. It is a medium run with little effort. And then there's another medium run with as much effort as you would like to give. And then at the end of every week, there's a long run. And then as you get closer and closer to the marathon, those long runs will alternate bi-weekly. So you lead up to 12 miles in your long runs. And then once you get to 12, the next week it'll go to 14. And then after that, it'll go back down to 12. And then after that, you're up to 16. And then you're back to 12. And then 18, and then 12, and then 20, and then 12. And the longest you ever run in this specific program was 20 miles. So after I hit the 20-mile mark, I was like, all right, I think that I'm as ready as I could potentially be for this thing. Like, I'm ready to just get after it now.
We should have mentioned this in the beginning, but tell us how long a marathon is, and then also tell us what your time was the first time running.
So the marathon is 26.2 miles, if I'm not mistaken, roughly 26 miles. And I finished the marathon in a little over 3 hours and 50 minutes, which kept my pace to about 8 minutes and 52 seconds per mile. And my goal, so I set a goal within the marathon. My goal was to be sub 4 hours. That was all I wanted. It was like, as long as I can get sub 4 hours, and this is based off me Googling what a good marathon time is. And then it was like, the Google answer was like, if you can run a marathon sub 4 hours, then someone should, it's a respectable thing to say that you run in under 4 hours. So I was like, all right, that's all I want to do. Just let me do that. So if someone asks me, I could be like, well, Google told me this. And so you can shove it if you're talking crap.
So that was what I wanted. So by doing this, you're not only respected by all the people who have never run a marathon, you're respected even by people that have. So that's pretty sweet.
Right. Yeah. But it's all relative, like so I don't think that there's no reason for you to, no one can ever take away from anyone who's ever run a marathon. Like you have that to yourself forever and always. But at the same time, like, if we're starting to talk about like people who are running marathons, I am a small, tiny little gnat on the spectrum of how incredible some of these lions and lionesses are out there that are running. Like just so people can get a grasp, I ran my average mile at 8 minutes and 50 seconds. The dude who is the fastest marathon runner in the world, I have his name right here, actually. His name is Eliud Kipchoge. He's a Kenyan. His fastest marathon ever was 2 hours and 1 minute. All right. So his average pace per mile is 4 minutes and 38 seconds.
He's just sprinting.
I don't
know. Marathon, basically.
Exactly. You're sprinting.
and he's sprinting it faster than a normal person can sprint anyway. Unbelievable. That pace for 1 mile is like flying.
And the fastest woman was like 10 minutes behind him. So like, go out to a track and run a mile and see what your average pace is sprinting. And then you'd be like, wow. So there's just, it's incredible that you run a marathon, but at the same time, you can be super humbled. Because I was getting passed by like 65-year-olds, 70-year-olds. They're like, come on, Sonny, like you little whippersnapper, let me show you what I got,
That's awesome. But I mean, there's got to be a special kind of respect for people that have actually run one though, right? Because it's different than, I have all the respect in the world for somebody that's run a marathon, but until you've been in the fire yourself, like that's a whole nother experience level that really only other people can relate to, right? Only the other people that have actually done it, which is why I want to get in my next question of the experience of running the marathon itself. What was that like?
It was honestly, it was better than anything I really could have, anything I imagined. So I knew during my training, like whenever I would have to run these long distances in my training, I knew that on race day, when I was surrounded by all the other runners and surrounded by all the people who were supporting the runners at the marathon, that I was going to get some sort of adrenaline boost from that, which I was hoping would help me when I was super fatigued. And, but the sort of emotions that you experience during the race are things that I didn't expect. Like, first off, the people that you're running it with, I sort of found that the race kind of puts you at your own pace. And then that pace is surrounded by others who are also in the same pace category as you. So you sort of find yourself running with the same people throughout the entire race. And there's like you're not talking, or at least I wasn't. There were people who were talking, but I was just focused on not dying. where like you just kind of have this unspoken bond that like, okay, like I'm running step for step with you, like you and I are going to get through this together one way or another. And then outside of the runners, Houston's obviously massive, so there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people that lined the streets basically the whole way throughout the race, who were just there to purely support the athletes. People are handing out bananas, fresh fruit, water. Everyone's got a motivational sign. People have funny signs. There were signs that like, this parade stinks, run faster, expletive. People are talking smack, but mostly people are just there to try and encourage and support you. And when it gets to like mile 20, mile 21, anything that can take your mind off of what's currently happening in your body was perfect. So like when I see a sign that makes me laugh at mile 22, I'm like, thank you. Like that is great, because that's 20 seconds where I'm not thinking about my knees that feel like they're about to snap.
Talk a little bit, one, that's awesome. Like just the event itself is just such a unique thing. Talk a little bit about, what was the lactic acid buildup like?
Yeah, so I think that once you're past the training program, you get a pretty good understanding of when your body hits a certain limit. And for me, I always hit this sort of limit where I pass from like efficient running into sort of like a fatigued jog around mile like 18. So as soon as I get to approach like mile 18, my body just sort of hits a different rhythm where I'm I'm running heel heavy. I'm much heavier per step. I feel it in my legs. I feel it in my lower body. I can feel it like in my abdomen. And when I got to that point in the race, it's not, all it is something that makes you, it's just like, makes you want to stop running. Right. And it feels like anything, at least I wasn't cramping, at least.
Yeah, that's good.
I wasn't cramping or anything like that, but it's just physical pain. And like, it wasn't anything unbearable whatsoever, but it is there. And every step of the way it's there, but it's something that I think that while you're training, you sort of just find a way to get accustomed to it, and you realize that it's there and you just deal with it while you're running.
I think that it's so easy to work out. And if you're doing it, and depending on how much you train and what exercise you're doing, that buildup is going to happen at a different time frame, right? Especially some of the intensity level will also determine what that time frame, how often you're working out, so on and so forth. But it's being able to tell yourself, it's the mind over matter part, right? Where your quads, and in my mind, I'm just thinking of like lunging is the only thing I can kind of, because I've lunged for over an hour one time, not on purpose. It just took me that long to get it done. So I'm just thinking of you do an exercise for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. And at some point your body is like, no, don't stop doing this. This hurts. Your quads feel like they've inflated to like twice the size, right? They're heavy. They just kind of get hard. All of a sudden you go from like you're bouncing to almost like a stiff movement. But when you tell yourself to get through it, and then some of that will actually subside and pass, it's kind of like a phase of getting through it, is that next tier from a mental standpoint that allows you to do really cool things physically, which I can only imagine is done when you're running a marathon. So what you're going through this, you talked about when that buildup happens for you. Now share with us your finishing. What's it like as you cross the finish line and kind of those moments, those short moments afterward?
Yeah. And man, you're not wrong when you say that your body's telling you to quit, your body is telling you to quit. And not only your body, I mean, your mind is telling you to quit too. And I was thinking like, man, because I run and I use the Nike running app, and that's how I track all my runs. And in my head, I was literally thinking like, all right, how can I just like stop running and pause this workout so that it seems like I can finish the race? Like I was thinking like, how can I find any way to stop this run? And you're right. At some point you just have to be like, the people who I talked to about, they're like, no matter what you do, just keep running. Like at the end of whatever you're telling yourself, you can tell yourself whatever you want to tell yourself, but just keep running, because eventually, no matter how far you're running, you get to a point where you're in, you know that the end is nearing. And with the marathon specifically, once you got to like mile 24, then you start like quantifying it. And like during my training, I would always run around a 3-mile loop track. So as soon as I got to like mile 23, 24, I was like, okay, it's one more loop. Like I've done hundreds of these loops to train for this. I got one more loop left and then I can stop running. So as soon as I got to that last sort of like 23, 24, it was sort of like a different emotion. Like you're still tired and you're still fatigued, but you know you're going to finish. Like at this point, like you know you're going to finish and you're running down, and then it sort of funnels you, the Houston Marathon funnels you downtown. And as soon as you're in the last mile or two stretch, there's people literally along these fence lines, and it's a party. And everyone's just screaming and yelling, and there's live music and there's DJs, and you can hear like the narrator who's like, "Come on, runners!" And once you get to that point, you sort of just hit like a sort of like a runner's high, but one that I had never experienced before. And then you see the finish line, and once you see the finish line, you're like, oh, like let's go. And then you just get closer and closer step by step. And my family was right off to the side at the finishing, and I could hear them yelling. And then you cross the finish line. And as soon as I crossed the finish line, man, I just bang, like in my head, I knew I not only finished, I beat my goal by 10 minutes. And I just like stopped, took a second, took an incredibly deep breath, and just like all these emotions that are like compiled, like the fatigue, the excitement, all the preparation that went into it. And then you cross a finish line and you're just like, man, I did it. Now, like somebody please give me some chocolate milk and a banana.
So good. So good. And I saw the video of you kind of crossing the line, family going, celebrating. What a special memory. You'll have that forever. No doubt about it. Like anytime you work hard, no one can ever take that away from you. When you accomplish something, nobody can ever take that away from you. No one regrets working hard. No one regrets, like you get after it, and then you've completed it, and you look, and as much as it sucked, you look back and you said like, man, I did that. That was awesome. Like, I'm proud of myself. Like when you're puking over in the house over here, right, in the yard, it was like, man, that sucked while you were in it, but you're really glad that you did it when it was over, and times that by 1,000 with running a marathon. What's next?
Yeah. So I sent that I was running out the marathon to friends and family the day of, and then I had a bunch of family tracking me, and I have family in Boston. And as soon as I finished the marathon, my Boston family was like, "You got to get up here for the Boston Marathon. Come do the Boston Marathon. We'd love to have you." And in my head, it's sort of like, yeah, right. I know, right? When you think of marathons, Boston's always up there. And the way Boston works is you have to have a qualifying time, which I did not meet. There's two ways to get in. You either have a qualifying time, and the qualifying time for people in the age range of like 18 to 32 years old is something like 3 hours spot on. So you got to finish your marathon in 3 hours or less in order to qualify to get a racing bib to enter the Boston Marathon. So I was off by 50 minutes. 0% chance I can knock 50 minutes off of my time, probably within the next lifetime. However, thankfully, Boston does this thing where you can support and link up with a nonprofit charity in the Boston area, and you can raise funds for this charity. And once you hit your fundraising limit, you get an entry into the marathon without having any sort of qualifying time. So I paired up with an organization, and we're going to raise some money for them, and they're going to get me into the marathon. And I'm planning on running the Boston Marathon. It is in like the third or fourth Monday in April. And yeah, I'm just sort of picked up in the training program where the time makes sense up into Boston, and I'm going to try and get into running shape for that one.
What are the lessons that you've learned after you've gone through a marathon that you're like, okay, now I'm doing this again. Here are the things that I'm going to tweak, or I'm going to change, or I'm going to stop, or I'm going to start so I can do it even better?
Yeah, I think that definitely just treating your body with respect and love, like the respect and love that it deserves, especially when if you're trying to conquer any sort of task, like many of like Jake Collins tasks, like lunging a mile every day, or lunging however far he lunges every single day. Or what does he do? He does,
At least 800 meters, every day, half mile.
Okay. Yeah. So like when it comes to anything like that, like in the beginning of my training, I wasn't taking it as seriously as I should have. And your body will tell you, man, like your body will tell you if you're not treating it how it should be when you're out on the track. So like I'm running something as short as like a 3-mile run, but the night before I had like a Mickey D's Big Mac and I got like 3 hours of sleep. The next day on the track, it stinks, like it's terrible. So just realizing that, like trying to clean up your diet as best you can, trying to get as much sleep as you possibly can, find your running schedule and stick to it. Don't be running at noon one day and the evening one day and the morning one day. And then just like set your goal and look every day, look at your goal and assess how you're doing and assess how you're getting closer or farther away, and then consistently be tweaking it and you'll get there.
So good. And there's so many things that we can learn from what you've just shared and try to apply it to basketball for our basketball players listening. And so much of it is you got to take care of the small things because they are the big things, right? So you're talking about diet, you're talking about getting a little bit more sleep, right? You got to make sure you're hydrated. All those things that we can kind of take for granted add up. And if we do a nice job with those things over an extended period of time, we're going to feel a lot better. We're going to perform a heck of a lot better. And then it's just slowly chipping away day by day, step by step, so we can start to make those improvements. And the consistent factor, the compound effect of, I mean, if you tried to do this workout routine, but you said, you know what, there's like 2 weeks, I'm just going to take those 2 weeks off. And then I'm going to jump right back in where I'm supposed to be. Probably not going to go that well, right? The consistency of continuing to do it is something that we can apply to everything that we do. Last thing for you, as you know, Kramer basketball, the Coach's Edge, work with a lot of players and coaches. What advice that you're going through would you give to them based on the physical challenges that you continue to strive for and push for every day?
So I'm actually this is something that I picked up in your conversation with Jake Collin, actually. And Jake was talking about how effective and life-changing setting a goal for yourself really is, setting a goal and sticking to it. So when he said that, I had already set the goal of running the marathon, but when he said it, he was like, man, set a goal and stick to it and just watch how it changes your life. And when he said that, man, I realized, I was like, I set this goal of being able to run a marathon. And for the past 2 months, man, I've been running 5 to 6 times a week. And then along with running comes all these other positive life changes because I want to run well. So when I'm running well, I'm trying to treat my body healthy. When I'm trying to treat my body healthy, then my mind is healthy. When my mind is healthy, I'm helping the people around me. When I'm helping the people around me, life is good. So it's just like setting this one goal has this waterfall effect on all of the other aspects of your life. So set a goal for yourself. It doesn't matter if it's physical, mental, with your friends, with your family, but set a goal for yourself, man. And then just try and hit it and watch the way that it works wonders into your life. And you're going to be like, that is awesome. And at the end of the day, you accomplished something and you feel great. And if you didn't, like, what's the big deal? Like if I would not have finished the marathon, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. I mean, I would have picked myself up in my shoes. I probably would have been disappointed in myself for a couple of days, but hopefully I would have been able to have the support around me where people are like, you know what, we're proud of you. And we know that you tried your hardest. And I would have known that I tried my hardest, and I just pick up where I left off and try it again.
Yeah. You bring up a great point with failure, because most failure isn't failure, right? It's just a learning experience, right? And I think we put so much value into, if this doesn't work, if I try this and I fail the first time, man, I'm such a loser. It's like, no, that's just a challenge. That's just a roadblock, so we can learn, we can get better, and we'll be better for it down the road. Things just didn't work out how you wanted it to, the first time that you tried it, which is the way that it's generally supposed to be. It's supposed to be hard. Like, what the heck? Why are we doing something that's supposed to be easy, right? It's worth it when it's a challenge. It's worth it when it's hard. So, Dee, I want to thank you for taking the time to jump on here. I know our listeners appreciate you. I'm proud of you, man. I'm proud of you. I remember I knew you were running. I knew you were working out. I didn't know you were running the marathon until the day of. I get the text from my mom. I'm like, oh, sweet. And that's one of the things I like about you is you're a little bit under the radar, right? Which I can appreciate because like, unless you know me personally well, like people don't know the different stuff that I got going on either. So like, I'm like, of course he's running a freaking marathon. And I didn't know about it until the day of. Like, that's so sweet. So appreciate you, man. Proud of you. Keep up the good work. And thanks for jumping on the podcast.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. I will come on anytime you want me to. I love you, man. You are an inspiration to me on a daily basis. I promise you that. I think about your work ethic all the time and try and apply it to my life. So thank you very much. It's an honor to come on and just try and give a little bit of 2 cents.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, man. And, again, your accomplishment is legit. Mad respect. Like, I got mad respect for you. And we will have you on again after the Boston Marathon. Let's plan that. Put that on the calendar.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.